Hello, everyone, and welcome to our post-graduation work permit information session for international students at SFU. My name is Karen Lockyer, and I am one of the international student advisors and immigration specialists at Simon Fraser University. I am joined today by my colleague, Miwako Arataki. Miwako is also an international student advisor and immigration specialist at the university, and she has kindly offered to moderate our discussion today. Next slide, please. Given the current context here in Canada, it is more important than ever to acknowledge the land that we are all on. As visitors on this land, we have a very important responsibility to acknowledge the unceded grounds on which we all have the privilege to gather in the pursuit of higher education. I would therefore like to begin by respectfully acknowledging the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kikite, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen peoples on whose traditional territories our 3 SFU campuses reside. Next slide, please. Moving on to our agenda and format for today, I will begin by providing a brief introduction to the International Services for Students Office and provide some information to you about how you can contact an international student advisor. We will then move on to address some frequently asked questions that were submitted by students during the registration process, just to get things started. And we'll then move along to take questions from students here today and answer as many as we can. Additionally, we'll be sending out a post-session email with some helpful post-graduation work permit related resources to students who registered for the session in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for that email too. As international student advisors, we are part of the International Services for Students, or ISS office at SFU. And at ISS, we offer non-academic advising and services to help support students from international pathways. You can see a list of the different things that we offer on this slide. When I say that we offer non-academic advising, what I mean is essentially your temporary resident status and your immigration documents as an international student in Canada. Our team of immigration specialists in the office are licensed to provide advice on your study permit, your visa, post-graduation work permit, on and off campus work regulations, and more. And in addition, our team offers advice on medical insurance in Canada, like BCMSP. Next slide, please. Here you'll see the various ways that you can connect with an international student advisor. We offer advising using both in-person and virtual methods, and this includes email, phone, live chat, which is like a live messaging system, and drop-in or booked appointments, which we conduct either via Zoom or in person, depending on your preference and your comfort level. We also recommend students to consult our website, which houses a library of immigration and medical insurance instruction guides that we have cultivated with our students in mind. There's lots of information about post-graduation work permit applications here as well. Now, as we move on to the frequently asked questions section of this presentation, next slide, please. I'll draw your attention to the disclaimer at the bottom of each of my slides. In the context of COVID-19 and other global events, immigration policy continues to shift and change, often rapidly, often without notice. The information that we share today is current as of today, which for those of you who are watching the recording is August the 11th, 2023. So I wanted to begin with a brief post-graduation work permit refresher. The post-graduation work permit is an open work permit that you may be eligible to apply for after you complete your studies at SFU. Since it is an open work permit, it is not a job-specific or employer-specific work permit. You do not need a job offer or work experience to apply for a post-graduation work permit. However, you are required to complete your program of study, and so that would be an eligible degree, diploma, or certificate, and meet all of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, or IRCC's, post-graduation work permit program requirements. The post-graduation work permit application itself costs $255. However, additional costs might be incurred if you are required to enroll biometrics, complete an immigration medical exam, and so on. With regard to the documents you'll need to apply for the work permit, all applicants will require two very important documents from SFU. The first being an official letter confirming program completion. Now, SFU issues two letters to graduating students. One is called a credential completion letter, and this one becomes available to you through GoSFU. And this one is your first official notification of program completion from SFU. Shortly thereafter, you will receive what's called a Senate letter to your SFU email address. And you can use either of these letters to support your work permit application. In addition to an official letter confirming program completion, you'll also need a final transcript with your final grades. Generally, you can expect to receive these documents in the month after your final term of study at SFU. You will also be required to complete the IRCC application forms, which may differ depending on whether you apply in Canada or outside Canada, a copy of your passport or travel document, and a digital photo. Additional forms and supporting documents may be advised and or may be required depending on your case-specific circumstances and where you apply for your post-graduation work permit. Next slide, please. So now we'll get started with some commonly asked questions that we received from students during the registration. Next slide, thank you. This was the most popular question. When can I apply for a post-graduation work permit? And the question sounds very simple, but the answer can be quite complicated. There are several considerations to keep in mind. Importantly, you must first complete your SFU program requirements before you can apply for a post-graduation work permit. As I talked about a little bit earlier, you will also need some documents from SFU to apply. From SFU, you'll require your completion letter, so that's your credential completion letter or Senate letter, and your final transcript with your final grades. And as I mentioned briefly on the previous slide, you should receive these documents in the month after your final term of study. Essentially, once you have these two documents, you can then apply for the post-graduation work permit. Looking at the timeline, you need to apply for the post-grad work permit within 180 days of completing your program of study. It's important to keep in mind that the date of your convocation or graduation ceremony has no relation to the 180-day application period. Based on IRCC instructions, we recommend that you begin counting the 180-day period from the final grade deadline for your final term of study, or the day your thesis grade is made available in GoSFU, if you are a graduate student and your program includes a thesis. Another important point in the timeline to keep in mind is that your study permit will become invalid automatically 90 days after you have completed your program of study, or on the expiry date printed on the permit, whichever comes first. If you will be applying for a post-grad work permit from inside Canada, it's important that you hold a valid study permit at the time you submit your application. If you have been issued a study permit with a validity extending far beyond your completion date, we recommend that you begin counting the 90-day period from the date you received the first official notification of program completion from SFU based on IRCC instructions. And again, that first notification of program completion is the credential completion letter. You may also decide to leave Canada before your study permit expires and apply for your work permit outside Canada before the 180-day period has lapsed, and this is also fine. I would like to direct your eye to the bottom right corner of this slide where you will see a QR code, and linked here is our recently updated and extremely informative Next Steps After Graduation webpage, which I would recommend that you review. There is post-graduation work permit and medical insurance information specific to both undergraduate and graduate SFU students on this page, and you can find, I would say, all of what we're talking about today there as well. Another common question, sorry, can we go back? Thank you. Another common question that was submitted via the registration form today is, what is the best time to apply for a post-grad work permit? And the answer to this one is, it depends. The best time to apply will fall within the IRCC rules and timelines, but it may also differ from student to student. There's a few considerations that you might want to keep in mind when making your decision. For example, when will your study permit expire? Do you plan to apply for the work permit in Canada or outside of Canada? Do you plan to complete another study program in Canada? Because you can only obtain the post-grad work permit once in a lifetime. So all these different factors may dictate what is the most suitable time to apply for you. Given the case-specific nature of this type of question, we recommend an individual advising session with an international student advisor. We would ask you a series of questions and then help you to understand the applicable considerations so that you can make an informed decision. Next slide, please. Another common question we received was, what length of post-grad work permit will I get? And this is another not so simple question. The IRCC website includes a lot of detail about how the IRCC officer determines the duration of the post-grad work permit to be issued, and I've included a QR code which will take you there. Simply put, the length of the post-grad work permit a student receives depends on the official length of their program of study. The post-grad work permit is also issued to a maximum of 3 years. Programs of study must be at least 8 months in duration to qualify. If a program of study is between 8 months and 2 years, the student may receive a post-grad work permit that's valid for up to the same length as their study program. However, programs of study with an official length of 2 years or more, and programs with a duration of 16 to 23 months without regularly scheduled breaks, may also be eligible for a 3-year post-grad work permit. I also wanted to mention the temporary measures implemented by IRCC as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in relation to distance learning and the calculation of the post-grad work permit. So under normal circumstances, all distance learning courses completed outside Canada are excluded from time accumulated towards the length of the post-grad work permit, and 50% of a student's courses must be completed in Canada and in person. As a response to the pandemic, however, IRCC introduced some temporary changes to this requirement, and this happened in 2 stages: full facilitation measures and reduced facilitation measures. I won't go into detail about each set of measures right now, but if it's something that you wanted to discuss with an international student advisor, we would be able to direct you and try to help you understand what measures you may fall under and whether your outside Canada study would be counted towards your work permit. It's also important to keep in mind that although we wish we could, SFU international student advisors cannot confirm the duration of a post-grad work permit that any student will receive. This decision is made solely by an IRCC officer, But with that being said, we can guide you with the resources and information that we have. Next slide, please. So next question is, what should I do if I took a term off or studied part-time while at SFU? Generally speaking, this is another question that is best suited for a one-on-one advising session because each student's situation and circumstances can be quite different. I will go through a few recommended steps that you can take though. First, the post-graduation work permit has a set of eligibility criteria determined by IRCC. So I always recommend for students to review these before anything else. These criteria include a requirement that students study full-time during each formal academic session or term. Exceptions to the full-time requirement may be made in a student's final term of study or during a period of authorized leave. Note that the authorized leave would apply mainly to SFU graduate students though, as SFU does not have a formal leave process for its undergraduate student population. Next, students can review their enrollment history at SFU to confirm were there any academic terms during which they did not study full-time. You'll see under point number 2 on this slide that for immigration purposes, formal academic sessions or terms differ for SFU undergraduate and SFU graduate students. For SFU undergraduate students, the spring term and the fall term are considered formal academic sessions for immigration purposes. For SFU graduate students, the spring term, the summer term, and the fall term are considered formal academic sessions for immigration purposes. Next up, if students determine that they've gone through their enrollment history and they determined that they were not able to study full-time in all the required terms, then what we suggest is that they connect directly with one of us, with an international student advisor at Immigration Specialist. And we can talk through further the possible impacts and the different approaches that they can take if they decide to move forward with a post-graduation work permit application. Ultimately, Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada makes the final determination on all post-graduation work permit applications. But as advisors, we are here to advise you and guide you should you have questions about your own specific scenario and to help support you if you want to move forward with your application. Next slide, please. This was also a very popular question. Can I work full-time after I submit my post-graduation work permit application? When I'm thinking about this question, I find it helpful to break the time period down into 2 pieces. So first, we look at the time before you completed your studies. And I ask the question, were you eligible to work off campus under your study permit in your final term of study? One of the criteria you need to meet in order to begin working after submitting your postgrad work permit application is that you were eligible to work off campus in your last study term under your study permit. If so, you can continue to work off campus until you receive official notification of program completion from SFU, that credential completion letter. Once you receive the official notification of program completion, you must stop working under your study permit because at that point, you no longer meet the requirements to work under your study permit. However, once you receive that official notification of program completion, you can apply for the post-graduation work permit right away if you want. And if you meet the eligibility criteria, which you'll see listed here on the right side of my screen, you can begin working full-time immediately after submitting your post-graduation work permit application under R186W of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations. If you do not meet the criteria, however, you must wait until your post-graduation work permit application has been approved to begin working again. So those are just a few questions that I picked from the registration, and we're now going to move on to the live question and answer period. I will end the recording in a moment. So for those of you who are watching the recording, thank you so much for watching. And we look forward to seeing you in a future workshop or in our one-on-one advising sessions. Thank you.